18 I noticed something kind of interesting. I guess this was all hand assembled, and he had little stickers, but he put them in the wrong place for how the box folds together, etc. Well, actually, I'm not so sure because they're on the exterior. I don't know why they'd have to be on the interior like that. Okay. So this is kind of a dirty little knife fight of an 18XX game. The territory that your board is so tiny. There are there's almost nowhere you can go, right? It's just this tiny, tiny little board. Yet you have 6 trains in this game, right? Like trains that can hit 6 dots. In terms of control of the board, there aren't a lot of dots for the companies. So I found that because it's got a low player count, the board doesn't end up being quite as blocked as you would think it would be for such a tiny little board. It's also, I don't know, it's got, it just felt like there was a lot of room. People could go and do what they wanted to do. And some of that has to do with the fact that players are sitting on 2 companies each. Well, not each person. On 2 companies, and they don't want to block their other company, so they leave space open, except for in a couple of cases where they were able to get both dots for their 2 companies in particular locations. I guess we should talk about components. Look, it's essentially a print and play that the designer prints and puts together for you. And, so it's not going to be the greatest quality components that you're used to getting. This is a card stock. It's relatively thick. It's not going to, slide around or anything easily. But it'll probably warp at some point. That's just the nature of the material. It is a double ply, so that might help. These guys are really kind of snazzy, laminated pieces. Likewise with the player aid. And wow, I got everything in one bag for some reason, but all the company certificates, they're small. That's actually kind of helpful. I feel like it goes with the game in a way. I said this before, I think. When you're playing something that's really tiny, it would be really silly to have like full-size cards, right? It would feel weird. And the fact that these are so small kind of fits with this, hey, the whole thing doesn't take up much footprint. One thing that I did notice that I didn't like, everything's laminated, you're getting sort of a top-notch print and play here, right? Like the kind of stuff that I would never be able to do. But I think the hexes for the counters, for the terrain tiles, the track tiles, I think they could be made a little smaller. And the reason for that is, it's either that or you probably want to provide, and the designer doesn't have to do this, you could get your own, get toothpicks or clip ties or something. You want to put some kind of distinguishment of where the water barriers are. I've found that games that, because the whole map basically gets covered with track tiles, really isn't any choice, If you want to get anywhere, you basically most of the track is cities, or most of the board is cities. So all of those are going to get tiles, right? And then the couple remaining locations are your way out of where the city is. There's one space here that's a regular plain track, or just has plain track, and one space down here which is over water, which is really kind of wacky, right? Um, so yeah, it would be useful either if these were a little smaller, or if they were. Or if you provide your own little, things to indicate the water locations. I mean, it's not like there's a lot to remember, you know. This one's pretty obvious, right? You just can know that. And then there's only 2 remaining. So maybe I'm much ado about nothing there. You just know that it easily hits me. No. And of course it comes with a lot of nice wooden pieces already stickered. Trains black side painted for you so that you can convert the trains and use them both ways. Really nice little the components in general are about what you can expect for sort of a high-end print and play. And it comes with a box too, so. The rules are a little bit fuzzy still in places, and not organized quite as well as maybe they are in some of the other XX games. I mean, they're better than some, but it's for that reason that I kind of say, well, one of the questions that was asked to me is this a good starter XX? And I don't think so. One reason is that the rules are a little fuzzy, and if it's your first time trying to learn the system, they don't go into a lot of description about it. Frankly, I think the best choices there, I mean, I still always stick with just get the original 1830. Because I feel like it teaches the most about the game. And that's one of the other things about this one. Like all of this designer's XX games, it's way out there, right? Like, it has a lot of different stuff in it. And if this is what you're getting used to, you're never going to see a lot of the pieces of this in another XX game. It still plays like an XX game, but you saw the difficulty I had with counting routes and figuring out how much the payouts were, or stuff along those lines. There are just so many concepts in this that are just a little bit different, and if this is the only one you're going to get, it works out pretty well. And there are reasons why it might be. Because it's very, very small, it's very short, it's built for 2 to 3 players, it doesn't hold more. It's just a different experience than I'm used to with your XXs. You're looking at a 2-3 hour game, they say, right? They say 2 hours. Probably takes at least another hour for a group like mine or a newer one. So let's take a look at the weirdnesses and the rules and what I feel about them. Okay, the first thing is the strategy cards. These are going to be anathema to a lot of XX players, because normally in an XX game, the only random factor is where'd you end up sitting? Which seat are you at? That's actually not a factor in this one. But something similar which is these cards are dealt out at the beginning of the game, completely random, and they're not all equally valuable. Now, maybe there's a balancing factor in the priority that they give you, but priority is generally not that important early in the game, in my opinion. Yeah. you get your first choice of companies to start with, and that might be a big deal if the companies are less balanced than I think they are. But you can also pick the companies that synergize with the strategy cards you have. Then those cards are going to be taken away halfway through the game and reshuffled and not dealt out now. Now they're bid on. That's pretty important. Like, you wouldn't want to deal them out at random. I screwed up my bidding process in my game, but that's that. The different capabilities that they give, again, some of them feel pretty powerful. Like, I feel like the biggest ones are the ones that increase your income. Either the city token or the bonusing off-board locations. Just because money is what the game is about, you know? I'm trying to remember. Let's take a look at some of these others. It can be really helpful to get that double build. Raising funds, we saw that come in to being important when it showed up. Financial planning feels to me to be almost valueless. However, it has a priority that I think is the second highest, no, third highest, something like that. It's kind of funny because Central Station is a good one, but you give up a lot of priority for it. So there's a weird kind of balance between these, where if you give one a valuable priority, then you're kind of inhibiting the desire to use the special ability early, because that priority might be more valuable to you. But on the other hand, it might kind of make up for the fact that it's kind of a lousy one. I don't consider the financial planning one very good. You're able to kind of, I don't know, you're able to swallow partially without swallowing, is basically what it comes to. Once. Political influence is, you get to ignore all water border and tile costs. That's a few bucks. Or buy an extra share from the open market, which, buying the extra share from the open market might not seem like that big a deal, but it could actually float a company at an earlier point. It could change control of a company because you're able to get an extra turn in there. So it's not just, oh look, I make the income of this company once more. So I think that could be a very valuable one, and that's actually got the highest value. No, second highest, somewhere in there. I don't know. Is there a 14? Yeah, there's a 14. So I had the numbers wrong. That's third highest. The other one was fourth. They're an interesting concept. They're different from any other. This is one of the things that's different from any other XX games. Buying trains. Okay, this is where the game just diverts completely. Not it doesn't seem like that huge a change, but you buy your trains at the beginning of your company's operating round, or operating turn, to use the proper phrase. And what that means is you never are in a position where you're almost never in a position where you have no train that's usable and you produce no money. It's kind of cool because it's a tight little game, but it necessitates actually also that there be a rule that you can't use a train multiple times in a turn, which is why the other games all have it at the backside of the operating turn. But it does really kind of feel very, very different, because I'm paying my money for my train up front, which means I had to make any financial decisions the turn before. I find the standard XX much more palatable to my way of dealing with games, which is, oh, I need money? Okay, I'll swallow. Here it's, oh, I need money? I'm screwed. Okay, sure. I think you can still get screwed over and have to buy a train that, you know, I don't see anything. I don't see anything that really kind of makes anything up for it. But it is kind of interesting that you're able to buy the train right away. To me, it's just more of a burden than anything else, I think. Share dealing. Okay, so this had one other weirdness in it. So because of the small number of players, and the fact that people never want to hold 2 shares of a company, and that's still the case here. It's a little different. There is a desire to be able to hold more than like 60% of your company, which is sort of the standard in an XX game. Sometimes it's 50. If you're playing an XX game in 4 or 5 or 6 players, there are enough players that they will buy your stocks if your stocks are interesting to them. So there's just a hard limit. You can't break it in general, and you end up, you can only own so much of a company. Here instead, you pay a penalty for each share over the second. I found people definitely willing to pay that penalty to make sure their shares went up. Generally, though, I think paying the penalty is probably not a great idea. And the reason for that is whatever extra money your company is making over another one, it's probably going to be less, especially early in the game. It's going to be less or about the same as the amount of tax that you're going to pay. So you can almost always find an investment that's a good deal without owning 2 shares of someone else's company. Companies float when you buy the presidency. It's a partial cap game. Those are maybe a little bit harder to tinker around with. Sometimes it's really easy. Like the thing with 1830, you got all your money right up front. You can make arguments that that's worse too, though, because you have to save some of that money to operate well. It has a weird situation where you can't dump the company on somebody who has as many shares as you do when you each have 1 share of the company. And that feels really weird. That feels really weird to me. I think the biggest thing with the operating rounds that I found odd, other than the purchasing trains when you do. Well, most of the track costs you money. All the cities do, and that makes sense. I'm trying to remember what I was going to say. I lost my train of thought. Oh yeah. One of the weird things in this one is, if you have shares of the company in the treasury, in the company treasury, you can raise capital off them at will. Again, this is something that makes sense if you think about how markets and IPOs and whatnot work, or share releases, not IPOs necessarily. But it's very, very different. Very few games have this. Ones that allow, there are some that allow it, but again, it's a rarity rather than the standard case. There's this weird black tile, which has its own, sort of funky special rules. And yeah. So the biggest thing that really throws me for a loop is the way you calculate. So everything's on 20% shares. Normally XX things are on 10% shares. 10% shares work really well because, hey, I make 160 run, everybody gets 16 bucks. 20% shares, well, you have to double that. Okay, that shouldn't be too hard. But the other step that makes it hard is in normal XXs, everything is based on 10 buck values. Here it's on a $5 basis, which they can get away with because of the 20% shares. That'll double that. So let's say the company runs and makes 15 bucks. I don't know if that's even possible. It's probably not. No, but let's just say it does for the sake of argument. Well, 20% of 15 is 3. You see, that if it was 10% of 15, it would be 1.5. Now, there are XX games that have 5% shares using the standard valuations, and they just give you the extra buck, So it's not like it's a big deal that way, but it is the point that you can get away. The 20% shares allows that $5 marking. Anyway, there's enough differences that I don't think it makes a great intro game. But if somebody reads the rules and, if an XX aficionado teaches the game, it's a nice little small game. It's just going to be harder to transit over to other XX games. Of course, it's not trivial to transit to this, as you saw with me fucking up my calculations all over the place. So maybe these calculations are actually more complicated, or maybe it's just a matter of habit. I'm not sure. If it's habit, you definitely don't want to start with this. If these are actually more complicated, they may actually make it easier for you to do other calculations. I think it's an intriguing little game. And, I made, when the designer came back to me with, hey, will you ever play it again? I definitely want to play it. I have a couple of people who we play XX every now and then. Well, we've done it once. One person from my old group and one of his buddies, where it's a really tiny number of players, we wanted to show XX off to this other gamer, and we're having to pull out games that I really don't think are really well situated for a 3-player game. But like other XX games, 2 or 3 players is a fucking knife fight. It is so possible. Like, you have your hands in stuff, right? You have so much control over the game if you know what you're doing and exert it. And I still think that's the case here, which feels weird to me. It feels really weird. It turns XX into more of a chess-like match and less of this sort of emerging chaos, right? I find that there's something so impressive about a lot of the XXs is that, look, you got 6 people making decisions, sometimes good, sometimes not so good, all with different, views and everything, different strategies going into it. There's no luck, and the games turn out differently because of this sort of just different mindsets in different positions, facing different things. That it plays out differently a lot of the time. Now, when I solo things, they don't turn out all that different, but that's because essentially all the persons inside my brain are me. They think kind of like me, and only if I roll dice do I get differentiation. But yeah, I think I find the smaller game much more appealing for that kind of knife fight and that kind of chess-like moves. And this packs a pretty good punch in terms of like the type of decisions you have to make and everything. Things move a little faster than you might expect too, which makes sense. It's tiny, there's not a lot of turns. Anyway, I can recommend it certainly to XX players as a kind of alternative where it's going to give you a different type of experience than your normal XX, while still mainly being like those games. All right.